Experience a membership that backs what you're building with American Express Business Platinum. Enjoy complimentary access to the American Express Global Lounge Collection and a welcome offer of 200,000 points after you spend $20,000 on purchases on the card within your first 3 months of membership. American Express Business Platinum. There's nothing like it. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum.
Gold Bond knows that things are just better with a little boost. Like your music? And your skin. Check out Gold Bond's new Plumping Collagen Body and Face Serum Lotion. It's clinically shown to visibly plump and boost skin hydration by 50%, leaving your skin looking hydrated and more youthful. Turn up beautiful skin with Gold Bond's new Plumping Collagen Body and Face Serum Lotion. Learn more on Amazon.
On December 12th, Disney Plus invites you to go behind the scenes with Taylor Swift in an exclusive 6-episode docuseries.
I wanted to give something to the fans that they didn't expect.
The only thing left is to close the book.
The end of an era. And don't miss Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour, the final show, featuring for the first time the Tortured Poets Department. Streaming December 12th, only on Disney Plus.
Of one of those things where you kind of go, oh, it could end in the most Spinal Tap way.
Hello, and welcome back to another new episode of Live Through That. I'm your host, Mike Hipple, and on this podcast, we dig a little deeper into the pivotal moments that shaped the lives of some of my favorite artists from the 80s and 90s. We're back from a little holiday break, and I'm excited for all the guests we'll have this year. I've got some great folks lined up, so be sure to subscribe so that you won't miss an episode. My guest today is Martin McAloon, founding member and bassist of Prefab Sprout, one of the most quietly influential bands to come out of the UK. Along with his brother Paddy and bandmate Wendy Smith, they were known for their timeless melodies, poetic lyrics, and understated brilliance. Today, Prefab Sprout's music continues to inspire artists and listeners alike. Martin joins us to talk about how cows and COVID played a surprising role in drawing him back to the music of Prefab Sprout, and how that eventually led him to start touring the songs, honoring the band's legacy, and stepping into a role long held by his brother Paddy, who's been facing health challenges of late.
I can imagine you've had this many times recently because of the pandemic, but the pandemic would have been a changing point for a lot of people, especially of my generation, because it suddenly wakes you up to, well, if we survive this, what are we going to do with the rest of our lives? And I think that there was a couple of moments within the pandemic that were particular to me, which involved every night through the pandemic, every day in the pandemic, I'd go for a walk at some point onto. I'm very close to a place called the Town Moor in Newcastle, and it was the first public space that was given to the people with the people's right to live on it in the UK. This is going back several hundred years, but the people have the right to this piece of land to graze their sheep on it and to do things on it, this belonged to the people. And it's the original moor in Newcastle. It's the first one in the UK. So that's my hometown. That's where I would go. And it's a big stretch of land. And there's a couple of very tall mounds, sort of like hills that, you see people running up them and exercising on them. So every day during the pandemic, I'd go for a walk through the cows on this massive field, and I'd head up to the top of these hills, and every day I'd take my camera with me and I'd take photographs of the same cows and skylarks and birds and whatever was passing. And those kind of things, that was my world during the pandemic. I'd walk out and I'd do that. But on one of the occasions where I didn't take my camera, and I was actually texting Wendy at the time, and it was evening, and I was dressed in white, and I've got my white hair. I had blue jeans on, but white, and a bull charged me from very close range, and I just, by a breath, I missed being garroted by this bull that was vast, and it was hurtling towards me by a rhinoceros. And I was able to, I think I tapped into my driving skills, which I've always had. I've been driving cars since I was 12. So I was able to pull back from a forward going trajectory, and it went through the space that I would have been in. And I saw its hind quarters and its head beneath me, and I managed to move out of its way, and I got away from it. And I think that was a pivotal moment within the pandemic of one of those things where you kind of go, oh, it could end in the most Spinal Tap way very quickly. The drummer garroted by a by a steaming bull. It was like Popeye. It was like one of those kind of cartoon bulls just charged me. So I think that woke me up, and it's kind of excited me for the last 5 years.
Was this experience one of the reasons why he decided to pick up the mantle of Prefab Sprout again?
It's kind of, I think that the pandemic was part of it. If you think of it as all of these little pieces, at the same time, shortly after that, still coming out of the pandemic, we had lockdown where we tried to start things up again and then failed and had to go back into lockdown and all that. And there was a point where walking through the same town road, but this would be later on. This was in the winter. I tried walking across a piece of ice, and it was a path that descends about, it's kind of a pretty steep decline, and I went down it backwards and broke a wrist, and then was in a car crash a few weeks later where I ruined my other wrist. I couldn't play any guitar or anything, so I used the banjo to rehabilitate myself to get back to the guitar. So all of these things tied together into a kind of let's say it just became a package of, you really need to get your hands sorted out. You need to get these things working again, perhaps retouch with the guitar, do all those kind of things. So yeah, so I think all in all, those kind of things tap into something that is a bigger whole than just individual little events. No, I think it was the end goal was just that it gave me comfort. It was my friend's banjo. I was at the time I was painting a lot. I had a studio in town. My friends, two of my mates had studios just next to me. One of them had a banjo in it. And because I couldn't play the guitars, but I could get my hand, eventually I could get my fingers around a banjo, which was smaller. I'd never played a banjo before. Well, Paddy had one, and he did play it on some records, and I will have touched it, but it would have been 40 years ago. I just started to find comfort in being able to pick it up and to use it to get my fingers moving again and work on things. It was provided a lot of comfort for me. I don't think it was to try and there wasn't a big idea of doing music then. I think the doing the music probably came out of a gig I did online, a Facebook gig I did online during the pandemic as well, for a Sprout website, which, bear in mind, I'm not a singer and I'm not a guitarist, or I'm not known to be a guitarist. I'm certainly not known to be a singer. That also provided a little bit of leverage for me to do things. But it was, yeah, it's just all of these little strands. So there's no big life-changing event that I can think of, but I know that just when you realize that the pandemic is affecting so many people, and you know that at the end of it you've got probably, I'm 60, so I'd have been approaching 60 during the pandemic. You kind of know that you've got another, if you're lucky, you've got 10 to 20 years, perhaps 30, I don't know. It's a lot of time if it's well spent. But yeah, I think all those things came around. So I think they helped, would it be catalyze or crystallize how you would, what you were going to do.
So how exactly did Martin start playing the Prefab Sprout songs live?
Someone asked me, they said, "Shy Burns getting out." It's a Newcastle saying, which is, if a shy child gets nothing. And I think somebody sent me a text saying, "We're doing this thing. We're having an online Sprout festival on such and such a day. It would be great if you came along." A girl called Miranda online. And I just said, yeah. So this was 2 days' notice. And I hadn't rehearsed any songs. I hadn't done a set list or anything. I didn't know any of the lyrics. So I just said, yeah, because it was, you're walking around the town, we were thinking, why not? What else is there to do? You know, I've taken all these photos of cows, which I must have 400, 500,000 photos of these cows. And the thing was that I walked amongst them quite freely. I've always walked amongst cows, but until the day the bull charged me, I thought, oh, okay. Yeah, it was just me, and it was kind of not thought through, but kind of that was my attempt at just doing something and not being. I think what happens is when you're a kid, when I was a kid, I think risk was big in my life. And I think when you become a parent, risk is taken off the table. And I think that at the pandemic, my son was living in London, and I think I tapped into, it's time to put risk back on the table.
Did playing Prefab Sprout's music give Martin an itch to write some of his own material?
Well, it has in a way, but at the same time, I don't think Sprout fans necessarily want to hear my songs. So I think, and I've always thought that, I thought you kind of, a lot of people say to me, why don't you take your art out to the Sprout fans? And I don't think there's a crossover. I don't think there's anybody, people like those songs because those songs tie them to their past, to their history, to their lives of growing up, loves, loss, all of those kind of things are embedded. When you go out and see to a gig and you see my audience and you see them gripping each other, sat in the audience, couples, actually crying, things like that. And they're not crying because my voice is so fucking awful. They kind of, some of them will be, but you're touching a part of their lives that you're not aware of, but they are very, very close to that. I think there may be interest in my art, but it's not really there. There may be interest in my songs, but I think there would, if I went out and said, I'm going out and I'm playing a whole set of my own songs, people would run a mile. And I think you just got to be realistic. I think it's a different kettle of fish. Yeah, and I don't actually see the painting and the art as any different to the music, to be perfectly honest. I have a kind of an overarching view of just it all being, this is going to sound trippy and half thought out, but you're dealing with light waves and you're dealing with sound waves, and those waves are just elements of the same waves that are just stretched further, or that's how I see it. And I think that you're just using elements of these waves, whether it's color or the songs we made, the albums we made, those pop records that we made were very colorful records for pop records there. And whereas the stuff I'm doing now, the going out playing guitar and vocals, is really me doing demos or doing black and white drawings. I'm doing, if you take the pop albums that are colorful, these performances that I'm doing are black and white reductions that stand up just as well on a gallery wall. So that's how I see it. I see it all just as one big thing. So I don't think and I actually see the gigs as an art performance, to be honest with you, because I'm not, I don't even like the term musician, because I think that implies it puts a label on you that makes you a target. I kind of think, don't call yourself a musician, don't call yourself creative. People will target you in the most opportune manner. Just see yourself, you're doing something that's much bigger than, and it might only be bigger in your head, but yeah.
I wanted to ask Martin about the transition from being a wingman to the front man. Was that scary?
Well, I didn't think it would be. It was at the time, but I didn't realize it until I started to have reactions that I couldn't figure out. Like, why are my fingers not moving on the guitar? And that was a little shock. Um, I think it came back to being a lecturer. I think that opened things up to me. Knowing that, because up until that point, I'd been a bass player in a band. I'd put my guitar on. It was my shield. I didn't have to use a microphone. I just played the notes. How hard can it be to be a bass player? You have 4 strings. You have a handful of notes to play. You know, you know, it's, I've never really seen myself as, that's why I'm kind of, the idea of the musician is kind of, I know some people who are fucking great musicians, and I hear people talking about music all the time on the radio where they really know their instrument, and I'm always thrilled by that. I like the enthusiasm of those people. I don't think I ever had that. I just enjoyed the songs and being a part of the songs. So whether it was me playing bass on it or playing piano on something, or just providing the finance for the song to get made, is more than enough. I've never been that precious about that.
How does it feel to be the steward of these songs?
Well, I think that's what people might put on it. I wouldn't say that. I'd say they're still in the hands of our Paddy. They're still his songs. I'll be respectful to them, because I love the songs. I actually play them when I'm not when I'm not with an audience, when I don't have to. It's kind of, I'll play his songs, I'll play Burt Bacharach songs, I'll play great songs, Jimmy Webb, Beatles. I don't play many people's work, but Stevie Wonders. I'll do all that, but they're very difficult to learn. Whereas our Paddies are extremely difficult, but I know them inside out because I've grown up with them.
I wanted to go back to the beginning of Prefab Sprout in the late 1970s. Punk was big in the culture at the time, and I wanted to know if that was an influence on them or how that movement affected the band.
No, I think we liked that stuff. I think we liked it. We grew up on the Beatles and all those things in the 60s. I was playing the guitar by 1969. So that was around about the time Hendrix died. I could play the guitar, E, A, and D, not much, but it was there, and it was kind of something to be built on. 70s came around, it was Mark Bolan, T-Rex and David Bowie and all of that kind of thing. We got into progressive music, kind of Genesis and all those kind of things. Punk came along, we got into it. I don't think we were ever against it. And some of our early songs were I hear demos that we did, and I kind of think, yeah, we were of that moment. We were into Neil Young at the same time. I don't think we picked up on any of the fashion. I think that was something that we avoided. We were never bothered about fashion, how it looked, what kind of thing are you selling. We just liked the angularity of some of those songs. Might have been 78 when you were 8 years old. There was a number of songs in the charts, right? So I'm going to tell you what was number. Can you remember these songs? This was the English charts, so you probably don't know it. So I will go for can you remember Night Fever by the Bee Gees, when that was in the charts? Can you remember Yvonne Elliman singing If I Can't Have You? So take yourself back to that age. You would have been 8 years old. We were writing. Paddy had written the day that was number one in the UK. Those songs were in the charts in the UK. I think Paddy had written Bonnie, which was on Steve McQueen, which came out another 7 years later. So, and at that time in the UK, we had the Boomtown Rats were in the charts. You had Elvis Costello with Pump It Up. You had Thin Lizzy. You had an Australian singer called John Paul Young singing Lovers in the Air. You had a load of these hits. Boney M were number one in the UK with a song called By the Rivers of Babylon. But that's what we were doing in 78. So we were I was 15 or 16 when you were 8, but I was playing those songs that became that. So we were into everything, and at the time that would have been Johnny and Farron Young would have been not far behind those songs. So probably within the year and the year afterwards, those songs would come around. So that was the era, but we were in a very small village. We'd be very young. Paddy was 5 years older than me, but basically we're still school kids. You're not going to be taken seriously at that age doing these great songs, but the songs still stand up, and they're better than a lot of the songs that were in the charts then. I think, I do like Night Fever, and I do like Even Element, and I do like Tavares and all those things, but, Nice and Sleazy by the Stranglers, we were better than that. Pump It Up, better than that. I'm just saying.
And for my last question, I had to ask, where did they come up with the name Prefab Sprout?
Well, it came out of us being very young. So, if I was playing 69, around about 1972, 73, 74, when bands like Tyrannosaurus Rex, T-Rex, loads of bands like that, Wishbone Ash, people just had two words put together, Thin Lizzy, whatever. It was like, you find Deep Purple, you find two words sticking together, and now you've got a band. And I think we did that then. I think probably around about the late 70s, we were thinking, perhaps we need a better name. Perhaps the name is holding us back. Perhaps we need something more modern. And then we thought, fuck it. Basically, fuck it. We'll just stick with what we've got, because at least we're kind of familiar with it. And for us, it was no longer something that we thought was ridiculous. I know it was for everybody else, but for us, it was just as ordinary as, Atomic Rooster.
And that's it for today's episode. Many thanks to Martin for chatting with me. He's got a couple of tour dates lined up for Japan in February, and I'm sure more dates will be added to this calendar. I'll post a link in the show notes to his website so you can stay on top of his touring news. And as always, a quick reminder that you can buy my book on 80s musicians and where they are today, 80s Redux, and its sequel, Live Through That, on 90s artists, wherever you buy your books. And if you like this show, please leave a review where you're listening. It always helps others find us. And of course, subscribe so that you won't miss an episode. Thanks for listening.
Hey, this is Chris Duffy, host of Ted's How to Be a Better Human podcast, and the author of the book Humor Me, which is all about how you can laugh more, how you can build deeper relationships, and have a life filled with laughter and delight, especially this year in 2026. The book is coming out now. It is available wherever books and audiobooks are sold. If you are listening to this, you are on a device that can probably access the internet. Use that internet to search for Humor Me by Chris Duffy. Buy the book, laugh more, have a great life. That's a guarantee.
We all want to know, what makes people tick?
How will they make decisions?
Handle feedback?
And work
as a team.
The Predictive Index Behavioral Assessment reveals how employees actually think, work, and thrive. Like how Marcus fits in a role with structure, and Margot's strength is collaborating with others. Because when we understand each other, work just works. Take the behavioral assessment today at try.predictiveindex.com.
AdQuick brings modern workflows to out-of-home advertising. From planning to launch, AdQuick makes every step simple and efficient. Brands can activate billboards, transit, and digital screens worldwide with unprecedented speed, all backed by real attribution. Bring your brand into the future with AdQuick.